Hello, good morning to the Americas, particularly to Bolivia and USA. Good day to Africa and Europe. Good afternoon to Asia. Welcome to this session, Indicating Climate, how to develop appropriate indicators on resilience in water projects. I'm Robert Kranefeld. I'm a policy advisor with the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, in the program Water Policy Innovations for Resilience. And I'm the host of this session and welcome you all for joining us here. Before we start off, I'd like to give some technical information. Those who joined other sessions might know them already. First, this session will be recorded. So when attending this session, as you do right now, you give permission to the recording. And if this is an issue for you, I need kindly to ask you to leave the session and then watch the recordings afterwards. But thanks for all who still stay. As usual, please keep your microphone muted as long as you're not a speaker, and as well your camera closed. For communication, we will use the app Wisambly, as you see in the downer part of the slide. There is a link as well. And you can click as well at wisambly.com and then add the code WWater4D. And there you can add a stream where you can post messages. And we will collect questions through Wisambly for our speakers today. So for technical challenges or any problems, we have as well a chat here in Microsoft Teams. There you can post any questions as well, and there you will get some support. So with this set on the technical issues, we can jump into our session, Indicating Climate. And maybe you've listened to the inputs this morning. We had already our study launch. We had the input from Nigel Topping. So we have already some first information on the topic water and climate change. Referring to the study, we feel a changing climate through water. We have global rising temperatures that spur the hydrological cycle and that lead to extreme events, to changing rainfall patterns, events such as droughts and flood. And water is kind of in the center to many issues around resilience. This is what we got from Nigel Topping this morning, saying he sees the close connectivity to disaster risk reduction, to food security, but as well to the whole dimension of urban resilience. So it is that we feel climate change and the climate crisis through water, but it's as well through resilient water management that we adapt to these changes. And regarding public adaptation finance in the water and wastewater sector, accounted for about $9 billion in average for the term 2017-2018. And with nearly 200 million euro, water is as well, together with agriculture, the biggest adaptation sector for the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation Development, BMZ, in 2018. That's the same situation for the past years. So how do we know this? How do we know that climate finance goes into the water sector? And actually it is, of course, as well through indicators that we can monitor our activities, but as well track financial flows. In this sense, indicators are as well powerful because they tell us a lot. However, tracking financial flows is not the only purpose of indicators, as we will learn today. Monitoring activities and actually communicating progress are at least equally important to them. So given the important role that water management, and including as well sanitation and hygiene aspects, has for the adaptation to climate change and to resilience, we want to address the question how to develop appropriate indicators on resilience in the water and in water projects. And of course, this question is kind of closely linked to a more general question, if what defines a good adaptation project at all. Because the design of a good adaptation project somehow depends on theory, and it's our theory of change. But in the end, it's as well through indicators that a good theory of change can manifest into action. So therefore, for this session, we want to shed light on one particular element, and this is looking on indicators. And this is one element, kind of the bigger picture of water and resilience. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator for today's session. Ingrid Timbo is the Policy Director at the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, where she I have a slide for you as well, where she coordinates a network of over 600 professionals working at the intersection of water and climate policy, and where she co-hosts the Climate Ready podcast for I think 2 years already. And for the past 3 years, she has also served as the water focal point within the UNFCCC civil society stakeholder group, where she advocates for including water more centrally within national climate plans and policies. So Ingrid, please, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert, for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Ingrid Timbo, and it's really an honor to be here with you today. So before we kind of dive into the session, I did just want to recognize GIZ for putting together such a truly geographically diverse session today. So I'm coming to you from my home on the west coast of the United States, where the sun's not even up yet. But we also have speakers from Bolivia, from Germany, and from the Philippines today. So I think that's really cool. And I also think that that really speaks to the universality of this topic of metrics and indicators. We know that adaptation is very context specific, so they won't look the same in all places, but they are critical to a lot of the work that we all do. So I'm very excited to be here. And before we get into our keynote, let me just quickly go over the agenda. So first, we will hear from Timo Leiter from the London School of Economics, who's giving the keynote address on kind of the state of climate adaptation metrics within the water sector. Then we will hear immediately after from Tom Pinella at the Asian Development Bank, who will be talking about MDB methodologies for climate finance accounting, followed by a country perspective. So we have the Vice Minister for Water and Irrigation from Bolivia, who will be looking at managing climate resilient water resources in Bolivia. Following that, that's where you all come in. We are using the Wisembly app. So if you have any questions for these presenters, if they come up while they're speaking, just put them in the app and we will try and answer a couple of questions following the presentations. And then we will close out the session. At this point, I would like to hand it over to Timo. I will just introduce him very quickly. He is a doctoral researcher at the London School of Economics and Political Science. He is an international expert on monitoring and evaluation of adaptation to climate change. At LSE, he is doing doctoral research on assessing adaptation progress. Until last year, he served as the climate change focal point at GIZ Tanzania, and he's a former advisor on climate adaptation at GIZ's head office, including giving support to BMZ's climate policy unit. He is the lead author of UNEP's Adaptation Gap Report, and he is also the lead author of a background paper on adaptation metrics for the Global Commission on Adaptation. So without further ado, Timo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for inviting me to give the keynote for today's session. And if you could go to the first slide, please. Thank you. So to get kind of to be precise in today's session on what we are speaking about when we're talking about assessing adaptation progress, it's important to look at these two questions. First, what exactly is being assessed? Are we assessing the risks of climate change on the water sector, or are we assessing the implementation of particular projects or plans, or are we looking at different results? I mean, what the effect of all these actions are, and whether this will be at the output, outcome, or impact level. This is the first important clarification. And the second is, what is the assessment? What is monitoring and evaluation supposed to do? Because it can serve different purposes. The most commonly mentioned one are to inform ongoing management decisions, or to provide accountability, or to facilitate learning. So when these two questions have been answered, they determine what the suitable M&E methods are, because there are quite different methods that can be used. Not all of them equally enable accountability or learning. Some focus more on learning, whilst others focus more on accountability. And as you can see on the right part of the slide, indicators are only one part of these methods or approaches. And there are even some M&E approaches which do not use indicators, as you will see later on. So the first key message here from this slide is if you speak about assessing adaptation or resilience in the water sector, specify what exactly is being assessed and what this assessment is done for. Next slide, please. Okay, we want to do a little interactive exercise with you, jumping straight into adaptation indicators. So this slide includes 3 indicators. And the question to yourselves is, do you think these are adaptation indicators? So the first one, cubic meters of fresh water saved by your intervention. The second one, in your water, in the community where you live or your water supply area, the water loss caused by leakage is being reduced from 25% to 22% of pumped water. And the third example, degree of implementation of an integrated water resources management plan. So you have now 10 seconds to answer for yourselves whether you think these are adaptation indicators. Okay, next slide, please. The answer is, it depends. It depends for all of them. For the first one, amount of water saved can be an adaptation indicator if the particular context in which it is applied if climate change negatively affects water availability in that context. In that case, it can be an adaptation indicator. Otherwise, it would just be a regular resource efficiency indicator. For the second one, very much the same. If the water stress is caused by climate change and if the reduction in loss helps people specifically addressing those risks, then yes, it could form part of a suite of adaptation indicators. And for the third one, again, it depends to what extent the plan addresses climate risks. So this is an example where the indicator requires further assumptions to understand whether it actually indicates adaptation or just a adaptive capacity. One more click, please, on the slide. Thank you. Yeah, so what we see from this, one step back, please, to the. Yeah, thanks. So what we see from these 3 examples is it is simply impossible to come up with a definite list of adaptation indicators, because whether an indicator is an adaptation indicator or not depends on the context. And therefore, unfortunately, we cannot summarize like a table of 50 adaptation indicators in the water sector. It really depends. Okay, next slide, please. So an important question to many project developers is a particular project an adaptation project, or is it a regular water project? Next slide. And as taken from the simple exercise you've just undertaken, unfortunately, indicators on their own cannot answer this question, because there is not a list of adaptation water indicators which you can simply plug into your project, which make the project an adaptation project. Instead, as we will see on the next slide, answering this question requires an understanding of the particular climate risks that are relevant in your particular area or project space. It also requires answering who is at risk at different population parts, may have different levels of vulnerability, and what is at risk. And the key to answering the question is understanding how far your project contributes to adaptation or to resilience, and what assumptions are being used in that conceptualization. And next slide, please. So one way to do this is using what is called a theory of change, which helps you to understand how your different activities lead to particular outputs, and eventually altogether, including also external developments, are assumed to lead to particular intended changes. There are numerous guidebooks which have been developed to support this. We have not time to go into any of them in detail, but here are just two of them. So the key point is that you please mute your microphones. So the key point is that the theory of change is the key that you need, and then from the theory of change, this also helps you to then define relevant indicators, because if you have mapped out what the intended change is and what assumptions you have used, then you can formulate indicators which measure different points in your theory of change. Okay, next slide, please. And now coming back to the very first slide and on the point of using different M&E methods. This session is about indicators, but it's also important to reflect briefly on what indicators cannot do so well, and that is indicators on their own do not explain why change happens. Indicators indicate change, but they don't give you the reason why change took place. Indicators can also provide false incentives, often in project development. If an indicator, for example, is number of people reached, project developers have an incentive to maximize that number versus maximizing the benefit of the project to the people. So it's important to keep that in mind, and also to look at how different M&E methods, some of which using indicators, others maybe not using indicators, can together speak to your M&E purposes. There's one journal article here from the journal Water Policy, which did this experiment in an urban water project in Indonesia. They tested different M&E methods and then asked the stakeholders which of them were most useful. And one of their conclusions was that the logical framework, which is very commonly used, did not contribute to learning. So learning may require more in-depth participatory methods. And this brings us to the conclusion slide. So the keynotes from this brief takeaway, whether an indicator is an adaptation indicator depends on the context. Therefore, there is no finite list of adaptation indicators. Whether a project helps contributing to adaptation depends on how it is being set up, and theory of change is one of the ways to do it, or to decide on that. It's important to critically reflect on the assumptions of why or how your project would lead to adaptation and resilience. And indicators can be useful then to document whether adaptation has taken place. These are the key points from my keynote. And there's one more slide here. Last year there was this background paper on adaptation metrics, which I have led for the Global Commission on Adaptation, which includes more content from for you to look at. With that, I'd like to thank you very much and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Timo. Many key messages that you provided well to all of us, and context is, I think, the main word we can take out of your presentation that will actually help us as well to get to the next presentation. And as the next speaker, I would like to welcome Tom Panella. Tom is the Chief of Water Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank, and he's responsible for the overall policy direction, operational innovation, and quality control for the water portfolio. Prior to this, he served as the ADB's country director in Afghanistan, and he joined ADB in 2003 as the water resource specialist and has led water resource operations in Central, South, Southeast Asia, including posting in Uzbekistan as head of operations and Indonesia as head of the water and climate change program. From 2000 to 2002, he worked as a water resource management specialist in the World Bank's Environmental and Social Sustainable Development Department, and he's consulted for the United Nations and other international and US organizations as on resource management. So, Tom, looking forward to your presentation on MDB's principle and MDB's approaches to resilience. Tom, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert, and I enjoyed, well, first let me express my appreciation for being here for myself as well as for ADB. And I'm going to talk a bit about MDB methodology on climate finance accounting, which I think in many ways echoes the previous presentation. So, you know, the scope, when we do a project, and we have adaptation, mitigation activities can range from standalone projects or components in projects. And, you know, we have many projects that are even multi-sectoral but have many different components. So it's a matter of picking out the bits that would contribute to an indicator for climate change. So when we do this, you know, building from the previous presentation, we have an idea of what is going into the project. We account for those components, and it's an ex-ante assessment of taking those activities and then translating it and monetizing it into how much climate finance is going forward. And you know, let me say this is an agreed framework across all the multilateral development banks, ADB, World Bank, Inter-American, African, and this is what we're expected to report on. So I think it's very similar to the previous discussion, except we have to monetize everything. Now, where data is unavailable, we're to be conservative, and I think, as indicated, it's not only is data not always available, but it's very contextual. And lastly, some projects will have both mitigation and adaptation. Try not to double count. Next slide, please. So, you know, we're tasked with then saying what is our climate finance, what is mitigation, what is adaptation. In terms of the accounting, as well as an indicator, and again, the indicator is what drives the accounting. For us on mitigation, it's reducing greenhouse gases or sequestration, which in the energy sphere can be carbon capture storage, and in more generally is generally reforestation, the whole red discussion. But then when you get to adaptation, it's a lot less straightforward. And I think our previous speaker highlighted this, that one, there's two types of projects. One, where you're looking at managing risks in the possible impacts of climate change. So basically you're possibly, you know, lengthening the tail ends on your distributions. And then you would have dedicated investments to address climate risk, such as constructed wetlands or projects that are purely based on a climate resilience paradigm, and not just taking, in this case, water projects or even roads or other infrastructure and adapting them for climate. Next slide, please. Sorry, it's can you click through till it's done? And I'm sorry, all these slides are borrowed, so I didn't do them from. So you're getting them straight from ADB. So so we have project level approach. So you have mitigation, refer to the comprehensive list of eligible activities. So you're talking about renewables there, efficiency upgrades, that could be a transmission line, all these things. And it's very straightforward. If the project costs X for a solar farm, you're counting the entire cost of that solar farm as mitigation. Now, I think, as was highlighted, context matters. So in adaptation, you need to know what situation is the project being put in. Are you in a possible drought, a possible flood, extremes on both ends? And what is the intent of the project? Then what is the link between the project activities and the identified climate vulnerability? So here, from a MDB perspective, you're basically really need to make the causal link on the theory of change that this is a climate-related project. And then 2, on type 1, which is the vast majority of the projects that I think MDBs are doing, it's incremental cost or proportional approach. I mean, we're doing an irrigation system and we have low pressurized piping for more efficient delivery. Now, is this just good water management? Is this climate resilience? And I think I appreciate the previous presentation that it makes this all contextual, and you go through this and you say, yes, it's this, that, and the other. However, I think the rigor in terms of one person doing the assessment versus another person is much more difficult, and you may come up, even with the best people in the world and analyzing the best project of what the impacts are, then monetizing it, you may come up with different answers. And then it should be monitored and reflected in the log frame or DMF. And as we also heard, that's not always the most informative piece of information. Next slide, please. So here's the 3-step approach. I didn't go through all of them, but basically you do the CRVA to establish vulnerability. So we have a rigorous screening methodology. Every project has to go through it. If you're rated medium to high, you then have to do a much higher level of due diligence. And then you're looking at what is the intent to address climate change in the project. And I think, you know, in some ways this comes down to then what is storyline of the project. And I don't think it's so much just storyline. I think it's really getting good expertise in at the beginning of a project cycle and working with the client and the project developers to really make sure that the client or that the climate impacts are fully integrated into what you're trying to achieve. And yes, you'll come up with a better climate project, and you will probably have more finance dedicated to it, which for better or for worse is the indicator we're working with. And then at the end, monitoring, reporting, clear logical connection. And again, I think this is very similar to the previous presentation. Next slide, please. So climate proofing, resizing infrastructure for future climate impacts, you know, give me an additional 2 meters of freeboard and more rebar and thicker concrete and more protection against storm surge, to incorporating nature-based elements, and we are doing a lot of NBS work, and that's a separate but interesting discussion that we don't have time for. And then all our urban planning, really climate comes through on all of it. And, you know, for us as an MDB, well, we provide financing, our clients borrow, and we can't tell them what to do. We can educate them and work with them, and we've made a lot of progress in places like Vietnam. China is way out in advance of doing many climate change and interesting projects. So it's a matter of really building the awareness and getting that into the project. And then on dedicated climate adaptation activities, there's less. So next slide, please. Okay, this is just, we do about $2.5 billion a year in the water sector. It's going up. A lot of it's water supply sanitation, flood, irrigation. All of these across these different subsectors have aspects of climate change. Next slide, please. So this is looking over the last 4 years in terms of climate finance. So this whole methodology, where does it end up? So if you look at just purely adaptation, we're about 60% of what ADB does in the adaptation finance. When I say we, the water sector, and that's both water supply sanitation and wastewater, as well as agriculture, natural resources, environment, and as indicated by Robert at the beginning, agriculture is a big part of what we're doing in terms of climate adaptation. But I think more importantly, on the right, you see the bar charts showing total contribution on the left in each year of water sector, but then on the right, you're seeing the percentage of projects that have climate finance in them in the water sector. So it's been going up, but it's about 70–80%. So it is a big part of what we do. We have a new program underway, I'm not even talking about, where we're trying to upscale this, our climate program. So next slide, please. Okay, so we have this methodology. We go through a lot of work on documenting it, but are we really counting the right things for resilience? So next slide. So when we're looking at climate change in terms of indicators, yeah, I don't think, money is perhaps the most reflective or the best indicator, but the money reflects what are those activities doing. Is it hectares of people protected from climate change flood risk? Is it water supply customers who have a more resilient intake? Is it sanitation and wastewater? So you can go from the money to the physical activities, and I think that's a bit of what we discussed in the last slide. But I think more interestingly, are these really the things we need to be looking at? Because to me, you're also in this way, you are putting the indicators on the means to the end, right? So the end is a resilient community, a resilient city. And that's kind of what we want to measure, but then we're talking about urban flood drainage, urban water supply, and these are kind of the means on how we get there, but that's really the place we're kind of focused on doing indicators, even if we move from a monetary to a physical type of assessment. Next slide, please. Hello. Can you go to the next slide, please? I can't see it if
I
it's moved.
switched it.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, sorry, Robert. It's
Okay,
just that I'm trying to keep in the time limit here. So sustainability, as I was saying, we have fixed targets and we're focused on kind of the quantity, the quality, hydrographs, flow regimes, these types of things. We're actually, that's the traditional engineering way we measure things. And if you look at climate change guidelines, basically you're altering these typical types of measurement criteria and indicators. But in the case of climate change, we have deep uncertainty, and do these fixed targets lock us into brittle solutions? I know I worked in California on the droughts in early 90s, and the efficiency was really highlighted, but then water districts realized it gave you no flexibility if things really got bad. So how do we look at what is the right indicator for resilience, and is sustainability the right way to do this? And again, I see it focusing on the means to the end. And I have no answers in this talk, as you'll find out. Resilience, though, recognizes we need both robust and flexible approaches to manage, high and low confidence climate impacts. And it also requires we have progress over time. And how can we measure this on resilience without resorting to the purely structural kind of sustainable indicators we've had? And last slide here. Thank you. So resilience is a way to approach things? Are we within acceptable limits? Can we navigate change through time? Do we need a management shift? Now, I think you can't toss out all the other indicators and moving towards a better set of indicators with physical outcomes from resilience or from climate change adaptation, but maybe we need another layer. Are the systems in place for us to deal with achieving a resilient society? So effective governance, connectivity, incorporating temporal variability, and spatial complexity. So we're in the process of putting our new water and resilience program together. So these are some of the things we're thinking about. One, we have to move beyond money. Two, can we go to better physical indicators as discussed? And three, can we come up with a paradigm of resilience? And then what would that look like? And I will stop here. I guess two concerns. You know, what does there look like in terms of there, and how do we get to indicators that don't require computational analysis that's impossible or lead to paralysis by analysis? And I'll stop. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. I'm glad that you led with not having any answers to these very probing questions that you asked. And so I might come back to that actually and maybe frame some of those questions to Timo when we get to the question section. So next up, we're very lucky to have Juan Pablo de la Fuente Cusicanqui, who is the Vice Minister for Water Resources and Irrigation within the Ministry of Environment and Water in Bolivia. Mr. de la Fuente was born in La Paz, and he assumed the position of Vice Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation at only 31 years old. He is a civil engineer by profession, with a master's degree in water resources engineering from the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. He has extensive experience in watershed management, water engineering, hydrogeology, remote sensing, among others. So Juan Pablo, Mr. Vice Minister, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you very much for inviting me to this session. I am very happy to share with you our Bolivian experiences today. You can go to the next slide. Well, Bolivia is a surprising country of extremes. The population is about 11 million people. The surface of Bolivia is about 1.1 million square kilometers, which is 3 times Germany or 2.5 times Sweden. It has the highest capital of the world at 3,800 meters above sea level. The altitude in Bolivia varies approximately between 90 to 6,500 meters. Bolivia has more than 36 indigenous groups, and the biodiversity in Bolivia is very high. I think everyone knows that. We have 36 ecological regions, and Bolivia is also one of the 8 richest countries in the world in biological diversity. We have more than 200 ecosystems, and for example, we have more than 200 varieties of corn. As you can see in the picture on the right, Bolivia has 3 main watersheds: the Endorreit Central Basin, which is the pink one there, the basin that discharges into Rio de la Plata, which is the purple one, and the Amazon River Basin, which is the yellow one here. The country is rich in water resources, but their spatial distribution and temporal variation really complicate the efficiency use of water resources. This is one of the main challenges we are facing now. Also, population growth is estimated to double by 2050, exacerbating the pressure on water resources. And we are already considering this for our future models, as we will see later in the presentation. Bolivia is one of the countries most affected by climate change. Drought, competition for water resources, and potential conflicts are consequences of this. Next one, please. Okay, so what are the climate change impacts in Bolivia? So we have a lot of impacts, but I'm going to focus on the main ones here. Bolivia has very high climatic and environmental diversity as a consequence of marked topographic gradients. Due to this spatial and temporal variation, we face water scarcity, and large areas in Bolivia have a strong annual water deficit. Here in the first picture, you can see that 60% of the precipitation falls in 4 months. This is in the rainy season. During the dry season, we have many regions suffering from water scarcity. Also, in the second picture, we can see here, we have high mountains up to 6,500 meters, but our glaciers are melting. For example, as you can see in the picture, we have lost 50% of the glaciers in the last 4 decades. Glaciers supply 15% of Bolivia's potable water year-round. This led to look for other sources of water in Bolivia. So we are really looking for new sources of water since we are losing all these glaciers. Deforestation is another big impact. Bolivia is part of the Amazon basin and it has very rich biodiversity. Again, the third one here is deforestation, which is another big impact. Bolivia is part of the Amazon basin and it has very rich biodiversity. However, much of this is in danger due to deforestation. For example, last year, more than 50,000 hectares were lost because of fires. And also in the last picture, we can see some extreme events such as drought, floods, hail, and snow are affecting livelihoods, water demand, and our crops. These extreme events have become more frequent in the last decade. We can see here 2 examples. The upper one is in La Paz in 2016, when we suffered of water supply problems because the reservoirs dried up that year. We didn't have water for more than 4 months, and La Paz is one of the main cities in Bolivia. So that was a really big event. The picture below shows snow in Tarija for the first time in history. This happened last year as well. The next one, please. Another clear example of climate change impact in Bolivia is Chacaltaya. Here we can see Chacaltaya, which is one of the main glaciers in Bolivia. Its altitude is about 5,400 meters. And once we were able to ski here, but now it has almost completely melted away. We have no snow now in Chacaltaya. So I'm just showing some impacts from climate change in Bolivia now. To the next one, please. So the adaptation is needed to advance climate resilient water resources management. Since 2006, Bolivia has developed a national watershed plan, which you can see here as Plan Nacional de Cuencas, in Spanish is the PNC. It was developed to improve water security in Bolivia's watershed. Currently, in 2020, we are developing the 3rd phase of this 5-year plan. First, we will make an evaluation of the plan during the last 15 years, and then we will design the new plan. This will be this year. In this new plan, we are planning to include climate resilience and NDCs and clearly link them with the plan. You can, yes, this one. In the PNC, we are following the United Nations definition of water security, which you can see here at the right side. The capacity of a population to safeguard sustainable access to adequate quantities of acceptable quality water for sustaining livelihoods, human well-being, and socioeconomic development, for ensuring protection against waterborne pollution and water-related disaster, and also for preserving ecosystem in a climate of peace and political stability. Next one, please. So one of the main programs we have in the Ministry of Environment and Water is called PROCUENCA. This is Integrated Watershed Management and Rural Development Program. I said again, PROCUENCA. As you can see here, it supports the Ministry of Environment and Water in its efforts to improve basin-scale water management and assure water availability for human consumption, agriculture, and private sector activities. The goal of the program is to improve water security in Bolivia, climate-sensitive water resources management. Here we can see the 5 components, which are governance, capacity, information system, gender, and NDCs. At the national level, the program aims to reinforce the political, regulatory, and institutional framework through institutional arrangements that promote consistent methods for monitoring approaches and data management. Multi-stakeholders platforms are being established in two strategic catchments areas, which are Guadalquivir catchment and Acero catchment. These are the ones in the map here. Acero is in Chuquisaca and Guadalquivir is in Tarija. You can please go to the next. Yeah, here we can see both of these catchment we are working now. You can see Guadalquivir in the upper picture. The main risks here are drought, pollution, and erosion. And Acero, in Acero catchment, the main risks are floods, pollution, erosion, hailstorms, and droughts. Next one, please. Okay, water resources planning in Bolivia. How to deal with uncertainty? Bolivia is one of the 10 countries most affected by climate change and is confronting problems of water scarcity due to lack of precipitation and increasing average temperatures. So planning needs to consider uncertainty. We have limited knowledge about the future. There is uncertainty about climate, for example, about technology, and also about how the economy is going to develop, and all social political aspects. This is a big uncertainty we have. At the same time, we must have short-term actions, but we have to keep the options open for the future. And it is very difficult for us, in fact, to deal with it because there is limited capacity and resources in the country. So we are trying to improve these capacities and resources in the PNC that I spoke before. Next one, please. So we are trying to, yes, please, one more. Maybe you can go one more. Yes, that one. Thank you. So what we are doing is a robust decision making in water resources planning. This is the methodology we are making in PROCUENCA. A robust decision making is needed when dealing with uncertainty in water resources and river basin planning. A number of studies are performed to improve the information basis. We must analyze biodiversity studies. Moreover, vulnerability analysis is very important, but also understanding data is crucial. So we have to optimize water quality and quantity networks to see where we need additional data. So this is like the baseline, this one in the left. And then we do the modeling, which is looking into problem formulations, which you can see here. Then develop scenarios and the modeling, which can be done with WIP, for example, as we see here, and HEGRAS, or any other hydrological and hydraulic model. Then we evaluate the scenarios against different futures. We are looking at a trade-off analysis, so we are developing a robust strategies for the future. And the important part here is the collaboration and learning with decision makers, scientists, and stakeholders. This is key to the process because it is participatory and promotes co-creation. Next one, please. Yeah, thank you. This is an example of a robust decision making that we are doing in Bolivia with PROCUENCA. So within the PNC, we develop watershed plans. The plans have to consider uncertainties and need to be based on robust decision making. Here we show the process for the plan developed for the Guadalquivir watershed, which is an urban watershed where the famous high altitude wine is grown. So the wine is one of the main productions here in Tarija and the Guadalquivir watershed. So here first we have to see the problem formulation. The problem can be described as a water security for drinking water use and production, like wine, as I said before. Uncertainties consider, for example, climate change, population growth, ecosystem, and health. But we also have adaptation strategies, which include water efficiency, water loss reduction, drop irrigation, reservoirs, reforestation, and also wastewater treatment plants. Based on this information, we can generate the scenarios for the future. The scenarios are made using models. Here we can see WIP and hairgrass. We also do water balance modeling and also event modeling if necessary. We can run the models many times. But the important thing, the important part is what we can see here as the scenario evaluation, where the models are being compared to different futures. And as you can see in the maps, we can see different colors. So depending on the future, the result is a different type of vulnerability. That way we are assessing vulnerability using all the scenarios before, right? So then a trade-off analysis is done, which looks at cost benefit of different measures. It looks at the robustness of the adaptation measures, their quality, and help with prioritization. So that's the main thing here in this methodology. We have to do a prioritization of the strategies we saw before. So we get to the robust strategies. Here, for example, the results in the Guadalquivir basin are efficient irrigation, wastewater treatment, ecosystem conservation, which were prioritized through this analysis. So this is how we made the robust strategy for Guadalquivir basin. Then, what is key to resilient indicators in water resources management? From the experience in Bolivia, developing resilience indicators are very complex. Developing these indicators, in fact, is very complex. As you can see here, indicators are multidimensional. There is no universal metric. Indicators need to match different timescales and levels. They need to consider different stakeholders from science, gender perspective, and indigenous, traditional, and local knowledge. That's what we know from experience here in Bolivia. They have to consider uncertainty, and they have to align between international, national, and subnational policies. And most important, they measure progress and process. So we have progress and process indicators. We can go to the next one, please. Yes. So linking local, national, and international agendas, such as NDCs, is important for us. We are in the process of developing the PNC3, as I said before. This year, we are developing a new watershed national plan and link it with NDCs implementation and clear climate impacts. So we have to link the PNC with all NDCs and climate change impacts. So for doing this in an adequate way, we have to include process indicators, which you can see here as engaging with the stakeholders. This means youth, science, indigenous groups, and gender consideration is key. Also, enabling environment. This means mainstreaming climate into national development plans and subnational watershed plans. And capacity development is continuous, as we need to reinforce capacities at all levels. And also we have progress indicators. The progress indicators you can see in the middle here. Reducing vulnerability for people and ecosystems. This is very important. Also developing resilient infrastructure, the use of climate and water information system, and finally the development of ecosystem-based adaptation measures. That's what we get from all these analysis to the progress indicators and the process indicators. So we can go to the next one, please, Robert. Well, thank you for your attention and support. I think I showed a little how we are evaluating indicators for climate change impacts in Bolivia through this example of what we are doing and what we are planning to do in the future here with the PNC, with the Watershed National Plan from 2021 to 2025. Thanks, Ingrid.
Muchas gracias, Mr. Vice Minister. Thank you so much for adding kind of context and complexity to this discussion and giving us such a great example of what Bolivia is doing going forward. So I know we're a little bit short on time, but I did want to get a couple of questions in, and so I'm going to kind of combine some of the questions that have been coming in. Tom had mentioned the role of kind of, he mentioned deep uncertainty, and so something that I've been thinking a lot about is the role of uncertainty, and the Vice Minister also touched on that in his presentation as well, saying that they're needing to commit to short-term action while also remaining flexible about the future. We got a question here on Assembly saying, with regard to identifying appropriate metrics, what is your opinion with regard to shifting baselines or changing climate change context? So again, this role of uncertainty, and I'm wondering, Timo, if you could address very quickly. I asked you a very complex question and I need a very quick answer.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, this is indeed a very important question, the issue of shifting baselines. In fact, if it is a complex project or change processes over longer periods of time, it may not be meaningful to compare in the usual way to the initial baseline. And therefore, what can be done instead is using so-called counterfactuals, which means looking into what would have happened if the intervention hadn't taken place. And that can be an alternative to the traditional pre and post comparison. So shifting baselines is indeed an important aspect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that was perfect in terms of time. I want to jump back to the Vice Minister, because we had a question as well in Vice Assembly asking, why is it important for Bolivia to link climate change, adaptation, and water, and kind of what are the challenges? I know you've touched on a few of those, but maybe in the context specifically of your updated NDC, which I know is due this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. Okay, so as I said, Bolivia is expected to be one of the countries in Latin America most affected by reduction in water supplies as concept of climate change. We have already been affected, as I said before, with examples, with droughts and also floods. In addition, Bolivia is one of the poorest countries in Latin America and suffers from one of the worst patterns of inequality. Low-income groups in developing countries are the most exposed to climate change impacts. So they are often smallholders, farmers, especially women, and their economic activities highly dependent on climate variability. So they are the first one affected by water crisis and droughts. Water and climate are strongly linked, as you know. Adaptive management of our water resources is crucial to reduce vulnerability, to avoid social conflicts over water, and promote sustainable development. So the challenges are related to limited and scattered information. Here in Bolivia, we have no data. So this is why we built water climate information system and optimize our monitoring networks. We are trying to build new networks so we can get more data, and also to reduce the uncertainty of the data as well, and of the models we are building. Other challenges are related to reinforcing capacities at the subnational level on adaptive management and strategic planning. That's a very huge challenge we have to give more capacity to the subnational level. And last, we need to focus on fostering capacities to develop projects with a clear climate impact to access climate funding. That's what we are lacking now, and we are trying to do, right, to access to climate funding. This is why we are now aiming to mainstream climate in our national water resource policy and the national plan. So in the PNC, we have the opportunity to include adaptation sensitive water indicators that we are going to do in the new PNC.
Fantastic, wonderful. So unfortunately, we are out of time. There were multiple other questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to you, Tom. But I know that there are other sessions starting immediately after this one, so I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to go over, maybe I jotted down just a couple of key messages again from this session. So we heard from all of our speakers really that there are no universal indicators for adaptation. The context is really important. Adaptation relates to and is dependent on environmental and social context, which also changes over time. So we need kind of that flexibility and robustness built in. Indicators can measure a broad range of things, from project level to national level global reporting, from individual climate risks to long-term impacts. And when developing metrics, don't start with the indicators themselves, but rather their purpose and the underlying theory of change. So with that, I want to thank all of our panelists for their participation today. And above all, I want to thank GIZ for organizing this session and this full week. Please check out all of the other sessions that are happening all the way through Friday. So I hope everyone has a good morning, afternoon, and evening, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you all for the discussion. Maybe
thank you very much.
Session. The next one is starting right now about mitigation adaptation opportunities, perspective for the wash sector, guidelines, experiences, and ownership. You will probably find the link. Thanks again to Tom, to Juan Pablo, the Vice Minister, to Timo for your inputs. It's good that the session is recorded. We can listen to it again to get the main key messages. So
Yes.
Have a good day, morning, evening, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.